Hollywood's golden age was filled with glamour, romance, and unforgettable stars, but not everything was as picture-perfect as it seemed. Behind the scenes, studios held enormous power, shaping not just careers but personal lives. In some cases, that meant arranging relationships, even marriages, to protect reputations or maintain a certain image. In this video, we're exploring 16 star-studded unions that may not have been what they appeared to be. Were they for love or something else entirely? The truth is layered, surprising, and at times, deeply human. By the end, you might just see Hollywood's past with a new perspective. Rock Hudson and Phyllis Gates. On the surface, it looked like a fairy tale, a Hollywood heartthrob marrying his beautiful, elegant secretary. The tabloids called it a whirlwind romance, and the cameras loved them. But behind the staged smiles and carefully timed photos, something wasn't adding up. Rock Hudson was one of the biggest stars of the 1950s, a leading man known for his charm, his looks, and his on-screen romances with Hollywood's most glamorous women. But off-screen, whispers surrounded him. Rumors, quiet and persistent, that didn't match the image the studio had so carefully crafted. Enter Phyllis Gates, a young woman working for Hudson's powerful agent. Just months after meeting, they were married. To the public, it seemed spontaneous, romantic even. But to some insiders, the timing felt too convenient. It happened just as the rumors about Hudson's private life were beginning to gain traction in the press. Their marriage lasted only 3 years. Gates later claimed she was unaware of anything unusual during their time together. Others weren't so sure. Some believe it was orchestrated, not by love, but by necessity, a calculated move to shield one of Hollywood's most bankable stars from a truth the era wasn't ready to accept. The truth? We'll never fully know. But the questions left behind have turned what once looked like a perfect marriage into one of old Hollywood's most enduring mysteries. Judy Garland and Vincente Minnelli. She was America's sweetheart, a once-in-a-generation voice with eyes full of wonder and sorrow. He was a visionary director, known for his lush, technicolor musicals and refined style. When they married in 1945, it seemed like a perfect artistic union. But beneath the surface, this Hollywood love story may have been more about appearances than affection. Judy was only 23, already a star, but fragile, overworked, and deeply vulnerable. Vincente was older, refined, and respected by the MGM machine that controlled nearly every aspect of their lives. The studio promoted the marriage as a stabilizing force in Judy's life, a happy chapter after years of emotional turmoil. But there were rumors, quiet ones, that Vincente lived a private life far from the one projected on movie posters. Within the inner circles of Hollywood, it was understood he had relationships that didn't fit the mold of the traditional leading man, let alone the devoted husband. They had a daughter, the future legend Liza Minnelli, and for a while, the illusion held. But the cracks widened. Judy's emotional struggles deepened, and their connection grew colder. Those who were close say the marriage was never truly romantic, more like an arrangement, something orchestrated to give Judy stability, and Vincente a cover in an unforgiving industry. By 1951, the marriage was over. And yet, their union left behind more than headlines. It left a legacy of complicated truths, half-whispers, and a daughter who would carry the weight of both their legends. Cary Grant and Barbara Hutton. He was the silver screen's most debonair leading man, charming, suave, untouchable. She was one of the richest women in the world, heiress to the Woolworth fortune. When Cary Grant married Barbara Hutton in 1942, the world gasped. It was glamour on top of glamour, but also a pairing that left many scratching their heads. They looked beautiful together, no doubt, always impeccably dressed, always in the spotlight. But behind the cameras, their worlds were very different. Hutton, despite her wealth, had known tragedy, loss, and a string of failed relationships. Grant, always in control of his image, was the picture of cool confidence, and yet his personal life was full of quiet complexity. There were persistent rumors, whispers that Cary Grant's true soulmate wasn't Barbara, or any woman for that matter. For years, he had shared a home with fellow actor Randolph Scott, and their relationship was the subject of endless studio spin. Photographed together in matching outfits, lounging by the pool, they looked more like a couple than roommates. So when Cary married Barbara, some questioned whether it was about love or optics. Was it an attempt to quiet the rumors to restore an image? Or was it two powerful people trying to escape their own loneliness, even if just for a while? They divorced after just 3 years. He refused a penny of her fortune. She later said he was the only one who didn't try to take advantage of her. Maybe that was the real connection, not romance but respect. Or maybe, like so many old Hollywood stories, the truth was never meant to be fully known. Katharine Hepburn and Ludlow Ogden Smith. Before she was an icon, before the world knew her as the fiercely independent, sharp-tongued queen of the screen, she was simply Kate, a young woman from Connecticut, newly married to a quiet, wealthy businessman named Ludlow Ogden Smith. They wed in 1928, long before Hollywood came calling. But even then, something about the arrangement didn't quite fit. She asked him to change his name, reversing it to Ogden Ludlow, so it would sound less unusual next to hers in the credits. An odd request, unless image was already on her mind. Their marriage didn't last. They quietly separated just a few years later, and by the time Hepburn hit her stride in Hollywood, the relationship was little more than a footnote. But what's most telling is this: they never publicly fought. He never remarried. And she never divorced him until a full 6 years after their split, as if keeping the title of married woman served a purpose. Hepburn never married again. Instead, she lived her life on her own terms, famously, privately, and without apology. Her decades-long relationship with Spencer Tracy became the stuff of Hollywood legend, despite the fact that Tracy was married and never left his wife. So was her marriage to Ludlow a youthful misstep? Or a calculated shield, a way to deflect questions at a time when independent women weren't celebrated but scrutinized? No one can say for sure. But what we do know is this: Katharine Hepburn lived a life that defied expectations, even if it meant writing her own rules from the start. Mickey Rooney and Ava Gardner. He was Hollywood's golden boy, a child star turned box office titan with boundless energy and charm. She was a rising beauty, mysterious and magnetic, on the brink of becoming one of the most alluring faces in film history. When they married in 1942, the headlines exploded. But the truth behind the marriage was far more complicated than the fairy tale the studios sold. Mickey was 21. Ava was just 19. She was new to Hollywood, still learning how the game was played. He was already a household name, adored by millions, yet fiercely protected by the studio that made him a star. Their union was fast, flashy, and intensely public, almost too public. Some insiders believe the marriage was less about passion and more about publicity, a studio-approved union meant to boost Ava's profile and soften Mickey's reputation. After all, he was already gaining a reputation for living fast and wild. Pairing him with a young, elegant newcomer may have been a calculated move to clean up the image. But it didn't work. Just 1 year after the wedding, the marriage was over. Ava later said she never really knew who she was marrying. Mickey, for his part, would go on to marry 7 more times, a trail of glitter and heartbreak in his wake. Their time together was brief, but unforgettable, a snapshot of 2 careers at a crossroads, colliding under the weight of fame, youth, and expectation. Was it real love? A publicity stunt? Or just 2 stars caught in the storm of early Hollywood? The answer, like so many from that era, may be somewhere in the space between. Rudolph Valentino and Gene Acker. He was the original screen idol, the Latin lover who made audiences swoon with a single glance. She was a silent film actress with connections to the biggest stars of the era. Their wedding in 1919 stunned Hollywood. But the shock didn't end there. The marriage was over before it even began. On their wedding night, Gene Acker famously locked Valentino out of the hotel room. He slept in the hallway. The story made the rounds in whispers, then headlines. But no one truly knew what had happened behind that closed door, or why the marriage had happened at all. Acker had been romantically linked to several women in Hollywood, part of a quiet, coded network of same-sex relationships in an era that didn't dare name them. Valentino, meanwhile, was building a persona that oozed masculinity and mystery, a foreign exoticism that captivated American audiences. Their marriage was never consummated. And after just a few weeks, they separated, though the divorce wouldn't be finalized until years later. Valentino went on to marry again, but even that second union would be clouded by rumors and contradictions. So why marry at all? Was it a moment of confusion, a publicity stunt, or an attempt by 2 people, both fighting their own personal battles, to find safety in appearances? In the end, their relationship left more questions than answers. But what it revealed was this: even the most dazzling stars of Hollywood's earliest days weren't immune to the pressures of perception and the cost of keeping up the illusion. Charles Laughton and Elsa Lanchester. They were a striking pair. He, one of the most formidable actors of his generation, with a booming voice and commanding presence. She, whimsical and witty, best remembered for her unforgettable role as the Bride of Frankenstein. Together, Charles Laughton and Elsa Lanchester were married for over 3 decades, and yet their relationship has remained one of the most enigmatic in classic Hollywood history. They met in the London theater scene and married in 1929, just as Charles was beginning his meteoric rise in film. To the outside world, they were a brilliant match, eccentric, intellectual, and fiercely talented. But as time went on, whispers emerged. About Charles. About what the marriage truly was and wasn't. Elsa, always clever with her words, seemed to acknowledge the rumors without ever confirming them. In interviews, she would hint at the complexities of their union. She once said, "We both lived our own lives, under the same roof." A simple sentence, but one that said volumes. Some believe the marriage was a partnership of minds, not bodies, a quiet agreement between two people who understood each other and understood the world they were up against. In a time when being different could destroy a career, staying married offered a kind of protection and peace. They never divorced. They worked together, traveled together, and remained each other's constant companion. And when Charles passed away in 1962, Elsa mourned him deeply, not just as a husband, but perhaps as a fellow traveler through a world that never really accepted them for who they were. A love story? A cover? Maybe both. Or maybe something else entirely, something that only they truly understood. Janet Gaynor and Adrian. She was the first ever winner of the Academy Award for Best Actress. Delicate, wholesome, the golden girl of early Hollywood. He was Adrian, MGM's legendary costume designer, the man behind the iconic looks of The Wizard of Oz, Marie Antoinette, and nearly every starlet in between. When they married in 1939, it looked like the merging of two creative powerhouses, but to those who knew them, it raised more than a few eyebrows. Janet and Adrian lived in the spotlight, yet their private lives remained just that, private. Whispers, though, never stopped. Hollywood insiders long speculated that both may have been gay, or at the very least, that their marriage was a carefully crafted arrangement designed to protect them from an industry that left no room for anything outside the norm. Still, they stayed together, not for months, but for decades. They had a son. They lived in the same home, appeared at events side by side, and spoke highly of one another. But the affection between them always seemed more companionate than romantic. It's possible they genuinely cared for each other. Two creative souls who found comfort in a shared understanding of how much the world expected them to pretend. Or maybe it was purely survival, a pact made in the name of privacy, protection, and peace. Adrian died in 1959. Janet would later remarry to a man with strong ties to the art world, but the mystery of her first marriage never faded. Was it love? A cover? Or something far more layered? In the world of early Hollywood, appearances were everything. And sometimes, appearances were all there was. Barbara Stanwyck and Robert Taylor. She was tough, sharp, and one of the most respected actresses of her time. He was dashing, charming, the kind of handsome that made headlines on its own. When Barbara Stanwyck married Robert Taylor in 1939, it looked like Hollywood perfection. But behind the carefully arranged photo ops and polished interviews, something about their marriage never quite rang true. They were both under contract with MGM, a studio notorious for controlling not just scripts, but lives. And in the 1930s, rumors about Robert Taylor's private life had started to circulate. Quiet ones, persistent ones. So when he and Stanwyck, older, independent, and already long rumored to prefer privacy over convention, suddenly tied the knot, people wondered, was this romance or damage control? They made a beautiful pair in public. Attended events, posed for magazines, and gave just enough away to satisfy the press. But insiders noticed they rarely showed affection, that their interactions felt more professional than passionate. Some called them a power couple. Others quietly called it a lavender marriage, a mutual agreement to keep personal truths behind closed doors. Still, they stayed married for over a decade. Long enough to calm rumors. Long enough to appear stable. But eventually, the curtain dropped. In 1951, they divorced quietly, with no scandal, no public heartbreak. Barbara never remarried. Taylor would, but those whispers never really faded. And neither star ever commented directly on the speculation. In the end, their marriage remains one of old Hollywood's most elegant illusions, perfectly lit, beautifully framed, and never fully explained. Loretta Young and Clark Gable. They were never married. Not officially. Not publicly. But the story between them is one of the most whispered about secrets in all of old Hollywood, a scandal buried beneath layers of studio silence, personal shame, and one of the most elaborate cover-ups the industry ever saw. In the mid-1930s, Loretta Young and Clark Gable starred together in a film. What happened off-camera was never confirmed by either of them, but months later, Loretta disappeared from the spotlight. On vacation, her publicists claimed. In reality, she had left Hollywood to have a baby in secret. That child, Judy Lewis, was raised as Loretta's adopted daughter, a story Loretta stuck to for decades. But Judy looked remarkably like Clark Gable. Same chin, same smile. And over the years, the resemblance became impossible to ignore. The truth came out slowly, painfully. Judy eventually learned who her parents were, not through confession, but through circumstance. And even then, Loretta held to her carefully constructed narrative, shaped by the pressures of her Catholic faith, her career, and the studio system that demanded perfection from its leading ladies. No marriage, no wedding, just a connection buried by time, fear, and the weight of public image. In a different era, their story might have been told openly. But in 1930s Hollywood, reputations mattered more than reality. This wasn't a fake marriage, it was the absence of one. A love affair turned legend, hidden in plain sight, and only fully understood decades after the cameras stopped rolling. Rudolph Valentino and Natasha Rambova. If his first marriage was a mystery, his second was an opera. Dramatic, lavish, and fraught with tension. When Valentino married Natasha Rambova in 1922, the world was watching. She was a costume designer and art director, brilliant, ambitious, and unlike any woman Hollywood had seen. Together, they were the embodiment of silent film glamour, but beneath the beauty, something never quite clicked. From the beginning, there was chaos. The marriage itself was technically illegal, performed too soon after his divorce from Jean Acker. Valentino was arrested for bigamy and briefly jailed. It was a scandal, but one the studios quickly spun into romantic drama. The public ate it up. Valentino, the tragic lover. Rambova, the mysterious muse. But those close to them told a different story. Rambova was said to be controlling, with a strong hand in Valentino's career choices, wardrobe, even his diet. Some claimed he was more of a project than a partner. Others said he adored her, but felt trapped between love and control. Either way, their relationship became a power struggle. Two strong wills under an unforgiving spotlight. And again, rumors swirled. Some said Valentino's true interests lay elsewhere. That the marriages, both of them, were more about keeping up appearances than emotional connection. Rambova, too, faced speculation about her own relationships, her own reasons for the union. By 1925, it was over. They never reunited. Just a year later, Valentino would be dead, only 31 years old. And Rambova, left behind, faded into the shadows of a story that never quite made sense. Was it love? Strategy? Survival? In old Hollywood, sometimes it was all three, and sometimes none at all. Danny Kaye and Sylvia Fine. He was a whirlwind of energy, a comedic genius with unmatched timing and an elastic face that could light up any stage. She was a sharp, savvy lyricist and composer behind many of his greatest successes. Together, Danny Kaye and Sylvia Fine seemed like a perfect team, on paper and in public. But behind the curtain, the reality was far more layered. They married in 1940, just as Danny's career was about to skyrocket. Sylvia was instrumental in shaping his act, his songs, his rise to fame. She was more than a wife. She was his manager, his writer, his architect. And for decades, they stayed married, even as rumors about Danny's personal life swirled just beneath the surface. Those in the inner circles of Hollywood often whispered that Danny's private life didn't reflect the wholesome, family man image the public adored. Stories of a close, possibly romantic bond with another legendary actor made the rounds, quietly, never confirmed, but never quite denied. And yet Sylvia remained. She crafted his career with precision and guarded their public image with care. Was it loyalty, business, or something else? An unspoken understanding that their bond, though unconventional, worked for them? They had a daughter. They shared a life. But affection between them was rarely on display. Interviews with those who knew them hint at a relationship that was more professional than personal, a partnership built on mutual ambition rather than traditional romance. When Sylvia passed away in 1991, Danny followed just a few years later. Their marriage spanned over 4 decades, enduring, unshaken, and still clouded in mystery. Not every love story needs passion to last. Sometimes it just needs purpose. Montgomery Clift and Libby Holman. They were never married, but for years their names were spoken together, often in hushed tones, always with a sense of mystery. He was one of the most sensitive, gifted actors of his generation. She was a torch singer from another era, magnetic, tragic, and forever surrounded by whispers of scandal. Together, Montgomery Clift and Libby Holman shared a bond that defied easy explanation. Libby was nearly 15 years older. By the time Monty entered Hollywood, she had already lived through more than most: a high-profile marriage, a husband's shocking death, and a life spent on the fringes of polite society. Clift, still in his 20s, was beautiful, brooding, and intensely private. Their connection was immediate, deep, almost spiritual. Some called it maternal, others romantic, and many believed it was a cover. Montgomery Clift lived in constant tension between who he was and who Hollywood needed him to be. He never married, never confirmed the rumors that followed him relentlessly. Libby, too, was no stranger to dual lives. Her relationships with women were quietly acknowledged, but never publicly discussed. Were they in love? Were they hiding each other? Or were they simply two outsiders, bonded by the same ache, the same need to survive in a world that demanded silence? Clift's life was marked by brilliance and pain. Libby's by tragedy and reinvention. They were drawn to each other like shadows to light, inseparable for a time, but always elusive. No wedding, no scandal, just a connection that blurred the lines between love, protection, and quiet defiance. George Cukor. He never married. He didn't need to. In a town built on illusion, George Cukor knew exactly how to play the game, quietly, brilliantly, and always just beneath the surface. As one of the most celebrated directors of Hollywood's golden era, Cukor shaped the careers of countless actresses: Katharine Hepburn, Judy Garland, Ingrid Bergman, all brought to life through his eye for elegance and emotion. But behind the camera, he kept his personal life tightly under wraps. In private circles, it was no secret: George Cukor was gay. But in 1930s and 40s Hollywood, that truth could end a career in a single headline. So Cukor surrounded himself with trusted friends, threw famously private Sunday afternoon parties, and kept his name out of the gossip columns. The studios knew, of course. Everyone knew. But they looked the other way, as long as the films kept making money, and the public stayed blissfully unaware. And while other stars were pressured into fake romances or hasty marriages to preserve their images, Cukor was spared, perhaps because his power was behind the scenes, not in front of them. Still, the price was steep. He lived a full life, yes, but a careful one, always calculating what could be shown and what had to be hidden. In a town obsessed with romance, George Cukor never gave them a love story. Just a legacy, one of unmatched artistry, quiet resilience, and a life lived behind carefully drawn lines. Tyrone Power and Annabella. He was the very definition of a matinee idol, tall, striking, with the kind of beauty that didn't seem real. She was a French film star, elegant and accomplished in her own right. When Tyrone Power married Annabella in 1939, the studios plastered their romance across the headlines. A glamorous American leading man marrying a foreign beauty? It was perfect. Too perfect. 20th Century Fox, the studio that made Tyrone Power a star, reportedly disapproved of the union from the beginning. They had plans for him, plans that involve adoring female fans and an unencumbered image. A bachelor could sell fantasies. A husband, not so much. Some believed the marriage was a quiet rebellion, Tyrone asserting control in a career where little was truly his own. But others saw something more calculated. For years, rumors swirled about Tyrone Power's private life, that his off-screen interests didn't match the romantic roles he played so effortlessly on screen. His pairing with Annabella, already respected and discreet, offered stability and cover. They stayed married for nearly a decade, but it was a quiet union. Few public displays, few interviews, and eventually a divorce with little fanfare, no scandal, and no lasting bitterness. Annabella never remarried. Tyrone did, but the whispers never really stopped. Was their marriage born of love, necessity, or mutual understanding? Perhaps a little of each. In Hollywood, sometimes a wedding ring was more than just a symbol, it was armor. Tab Hunter and Debbie Reynolds. In the 1950s, no two names sparkled brighter on the marquee. Debbie Reynolds, America's sweetheart, full of charm and optimism. Tab Hunter, the blonde all-American dream, with a smile that made moviegoers melt. And when rumors began to swirl that the two young stars were dating, the press couldn't get enough. But behind the headlines, the truth was far more scripted than spontaneous. Tab Hunter, at the height of his fame, was living a double life, one created by the studio system, designed to protect its most valuable assets. He was under contract, and that contract didn't just control his films, it controlled his image. Being seen as a romantic lead wasn't enough. He had to be one, in the eyes of the public. So the studios did what they always did. They staged. They paired. They planted stories. Debbie Reynolds, already beloved by the public and recently connected to other high-profile romances, was the perfect candidate. The two were spotted together at events, photographed at parties, and quietly encouraged to date, or at least appear to. Tab Hunter would later confirm it in his memoir. The pairing was publicity. A carefully choreographed illusion meant to deflect attention from questions the studios didn't want asked. Debbie, ever the professional, played her part with grace. And Tab? He played along too, because in that era, the cost of honesty was far too high. They were never truly together. But their names, linked for a moment in time, remind us how much of old Hollywood was performance, not just on screen but everywhere. Behind the glamour, behind the red carpets and perfectly lit publicity photos, old Hollywood was a place of careful construction, where image often mattered more than truth, and love stories were sometimes written by studios instead of hearts. These relationships, whether real, arranged, or somewhere in between, reflect a time when stars were expected to be symbols, not people. And yet, in each of these stories, we glimpse the quiet resilience of those who lived behind the spotlight. If you found this glimpse into Hollywood's hidden past as fascinating as we did, don't forget to subscribe for more untold stories, forgotten legends, and the truths that time tried to bury. Because sometimes the real drama wasn't on the screen, it was happening just out of frame.